Hello all. Today we are going to discuss our paper Key Point Based Adaptive Visual Servoing for Control of Robotic Manipulators in Configuration Space. I'm Jani Chatterjee, and my primary motivation is to develop a better and more efficient method of vision-based control. Now let's open with some nice videos. Here, the robot is looking into the task space and is following a 3D bounding box and a QR code in the image space to achieve a grasping task. Here, a robotic manipulator is aligning a blue cable to a red target shape and a sponge to the red target contour. In this experiment, a drone is trying to land on a moving shipping deck by following the Aruko markers on the deck using a camera. Now, all these experiments are examples of vision-based control method or visual servoing, where the robot, by looking into the task space, is receiving visual feedback, which is used to obtain the control error. These visual feedbacks help the robot gather and utilize the external information in the task space, which can help it operate much more efficiently and effectively in unstructured environments compared to a traditional control method. Now, visual servoing can be broadly divided into image-based visual servoing and position-based visual servoing. For the interest of time, today we will only be discussing image-based visual servoing in this paper. Now, IPVS have two main camera configuration setup. The in-hand setup, where the camera is typically attached to a mobile robot or a robotic manipulator and is moving in space while observing a target object. The other setup, eye-to-hand, where the camera is fixed in the environment and the observed object is moving, either being attached to a manipulator or a mobile robot, or similar setups. Now, this is a very common eye-in-hand setup where the camera is attached to the arm and is looking into a target object in space. This image shows the camera view of the initial feature position P in colored process and reference feature position P star in colored circles. The objective of the image-based visual servoing is to align this initial feature position to the reference feature position by controlling the robot. Now, this block diagram describes the image-based visual servoing, where a reference and a current visual feature is added to the controller. The control error is the error between this current and reference feature. We obtain the feature velocity by combining a negative control gain lambda, the inverse of the image Jacobian, and the feature error. The image Jacobian relates the feature velocity to Cartesian velocity. The joint velocity is obtained by combining the robot Jacobian with the feature velocity. However, we can replace the feature velocity equation from 1 into equation 2 to obtain equation 3, where the joint velocity is obtained by combining the control gain, the robot and the image Jacobian inverse, and the feature error. And usually we combine the robot and the image Jacobian like as in JC hat, and which gives us equation 4, which is the formal equation for visual servoing. In this video, the visual servoing is at work, where the arm is manipulating itself to align the initial and the target feature positions. Now, visual servoing work quite robustly, even in case of inaccurate robot model. And as discussed earlier, the visual feedback helps the IPVS to work much more efficiently in an unstructured environment. Also, in cases of soft or deformable robots, where the model is not as distinctive as rigid body robots, IPVS is much effective than traditional control method in controlling. Image-based visual servoing is amazing. However, imagine a use case where the target feature position in an image space given like so. Now, a standard 2 degree of arm can reach the position in this configuration we'll call elbow left, or in this configuration we'll call elbow right. Now, if the intended configuration is elbow left, like I want my robot to reach the target feature position in this configuration for whatever reasons, and the robot tries to end up in this configuration, Technically, the control is not wrong. However, it's just not reaching the position in the configuration that I am expecting it to. This led us to think about using more than one target feature along the configuration space of the robot rather than using only one feature in the end effector. Also, look into this video. In this hand setup, the camera is looking into the target object and the system is color segmenting the object to achieve a pick and place task. In this eye-to-hand setup, the camera is capturing the Aruko marker to control the robot in image space. Now, this kind of distinctive visual features like colored markers, Arukos, or QR codes are very commonly used in IBVS schemes. However, if there is a mistake in color thresholding in the control loop, or the camera fails to capture the Aruko marker for some reason, I mean, it is just pasted to the manipulator. It can fall off when the robot is moving. This will lead to inevitable control failure. This led us to think about using the naturally appearing features on the robot body, which could be more reliable and agnostic to the system or the camera failure. We attempted to remove all these shortcomings, as discussed in the previous slides, in our prior work, skeleton-based adaptive visual surveying. Here we aimed at generating a natural features and control the robot in its configuration space. Body. Sorry, the screen sharing stopped. The blue curve along the robot's body is the process skeleton. We then fit a B-spline curve to it. The red curve along the arm is the fitted B-spline curve. We use the coefficient of the B-spline curve, also known as control points, marked in yellow in this graphic, as the control features for the servoing mechanism. You can see that there are more than one control points along the shape of the robot. That means we're using more than one control feature, and we are controlling the robot in its configuration space. We compared our skeleton-based method with traditional control, visual servoing, and found out that our method is much more robust than the baseline method with a faster transient response. However, to extract the skeleton, we need to spawn both RGB and depth images at the same time, which leads to heavy image processing and computing. And sometimes due to inconsistency of depth images, due to lighting conditions, and as such, the features are quite noisy. And while extracting the skeleton from the depth images, they sometimes branch out. To restrict the skeleton along the configuration of the robot, we needed to use Aruko markers at the base and the end effector of the arm. This means that even though we are using natural features and are capable of controlling the robot in configuration space, we are still reliant on fiducial markers. We got inspiration from the key point detection approach to solve human pose estimation problem in computer vision. In this problem, key points are the pixel coordinates of a point on a human body part on an image. The red dots are the key points you can see on certain body parts like head, neck, left and right shoulder, knee, elbows. Now, there are quite a few popular datasets in literature that annotate key points for human body parts like Microsoft COCO. This table depicts the key points labeled in COCO dataset. These datasets were used to train deep learning models to estimate human pose in real time. Open pose by CMA CMU Perpetual Lab is seen here estimating human pose in real time. And this is an example of purely natural feature in an image. Nobody is stamping an Naruto marker on Charlie Chaplin. Neither his hat is getting color segmented for tracking. Now, this led us to look for similar data sets on training models for robotic manipulators. And lucky for us, not too long ago, NVIDIA Labs and CMU Perpetual Labs collaborated to create the DREAM pipeline. The authors collected hundreds of thousands of images of popular manipulators like Panda, Puka, and Baxter in simulation and annotated the joint location on the robots as key points. This is a sample simulated image data for a Panda robot. This data is then trained in an encoder-decoder model to predict 2D key points on images of real robots. Their end goal, however, was to pass the 2D key points to a PNP solver to get the camera extrinsics with a single image. However, we ran the pipeline with some DREAMS test set of real robots by using only this part of the pipeline. So these are the inference results from DREAMS test set. And as you can see in the first image, more or less all the joints are correctly identified if you compare with the ground truth example here. However, in this example, we are seeing that the base joint is shifted too close to the joint 2. So this kind of inconsistency may be detrimental to our control scheme. We still try to track the joint key points using the DREAM framework on our Panda arm in our research environment. And here you can see the first image, all the joint key points are identified. However, in the next two, most of the joint key points are missing. So this could very well be because of the sim to real gap for dataset generation. However, even though DREAM was an excellent starting point for our purpose, it was not exactly what we are looking for. This brings us to our proposed method. As discussed earlier, we aim to achieve purely natural features on the robot's body. Also, we aim to control the robot in configuration space. The first phase of our proposed method is data connection. We start with arbitrarily moving the arm in different configurations in space by applying small velocities to different joints. We read the joints from the ROS controller and pass it to a forward kinematics pipeline to obtain the 3D locations of every joint. We also read the camera intrinsics from the ROS wrapper of the Intel RealSense T435i camera that we were using. And we also received the camera extrinsics from our old friend, NVIDIA DREAM. We combine these three acquired information and use them in this equation, which is the distortion-free projective transformation given by a pinhole camera model to get P, which is the pixel coordinates of the 3D joint locations in image space. We save these pixel coordinates in a JSON file as annotated key points. We run this process of several configurations to create our dataset. This is our dataset collection pipeline. A typical sample image with annotated key points and bounding box in our dataset looks like this. We have identified 10 key points on the robots and annotated 10 key points and bounding boxes in this JSON file. We have open sourced our data collection pipeline because it is relevant for other rigid body robots as well. Now that we have our data set, we train a network using this data set created. We are using the keypoint RCNN model for training the network. Keypoint RCNN, which is an extension of the mask RCNN, is the state-of-the-art algorithm for keypoint tracking in human pose estimation. The above block diagram is the keypoint RCNN architecture modified for our dataset. The model is run on a backbone of ResNet 50 FPN, which is a feature pyramid network which extracts features in different scales and resolution to diversify the feature information in the training network. This extracted features from the backbone is then passed to something called a regional proposal layer, which predicts the rough location of the number of objects detected in that feature map. In our case, it will be the key points and the bounding boxes. Now, the feature maps in the regional proposal layer are of variable sizes, so we need to pass it through an ROI aligned layer to make them into an uniform, fixed size feature maps to be used in two different levels of convolutional layer, where this convolution layer with the key point RCNN head is actually detecting the heat map for predicted key points, and this convolution layer is actually predicting the offsets of the bounding box and the confidence scores. At the end of the training, we were able to predict key points on an image like this. So here is another example of inference on our experimental setup using our training model for different configurations. You can see here. Now that we have the predicted key points, we pass them as measured and reference feature position P and P star respectively in an adaptive visual surveying scheme. We calculate the feature velocity VP by combining a control gain lambda, the image Jacobian, and the error in equation 2. We obtain the joint velocity QR dot by combining the robot Jacobian and the feature velocity. Replacing equation 2 and equation 3, we get the current joint velocity as a combination of the control gain, the robot Jacobian, the image Jacobian, and the feature. We combine the robot and the image Jacobian from equation 4 to obtain the combined Jacobian, JC hat, in an adaptive visual survey. We get the combined Jacobian, JC hat, in equation 4. In an adaptive visual surveying, we estimate the combined Jacobian online rather than giving it a fixed interaction matrix. Now, how do we do that? We start by deciding a sample size n. We will also call it a window size. We will apply a small excitation velocity to the robot and collect the n samples of velocities as capital Q dot. We will also record the changes in image features and collect them as capital P dot. We then create a Jacobian matrix. We will call it J init, which is just a matrix of a random number. We pass J init, the Q dot, and the P dot through a single shot least square optimization scheme, also known as correction term, in equation 1. This gives us the correction term delta J init, which is then added to the J init, and we get the first Jacobian that we need to use in the control loop. In the control loop, we update the Jacobian every n window using the same logic as above. The correction term delta JC hat gets added to the JC hat of the previous window to update the Jacobian of the current window. Although here, the applied velocities are now calculated by the visual surveying control as described in the last slide. The window size is very important, as a large window size will make the controller robust to noise and sudden spikes in velocities as it is getting longer to learn about the model, but it will also take longer to converge. A small window size is ideal when the features itself are robust. So here we have our overall pipeline for control algorithm. we create the data set, we pass it through the key point RCNN architecture to train our model. We pass our goal image to with the trained model to get the reference predicted points or reference feature points. We are also passing current images through the trained model to get our currently measured feature points. We obtain the feature error, pass it through the visual servo controller. We estimate our combined Jacobian, and we get our joint velocity reference, which is then passed to the inner velocity control loop to move the robot to the current configuration. Now, I would like to bring your attention to the combined Jacobian that we talked about. Since this Jacobian is estimated online, we are not using any known robot model in this control scheme. Neither we are using any encoder information within the control loop. Now let's do some experiments. We did 18 experiments to variable goal configurations in planar space where the plane of the motion is parallel to the image plane. Also, we only used 3 key points as we are comparing the performance with a skeleton-based method where only 3 control features were used. Before starting the comparison, I'd like to give you some sample performance metrics. Here you can see the feature errors are smoothly converging in a very small time. So is the error norm. The input joint velocities are also quite fast and smooth in convergence. The model error does not converge to 0, but it gets into a steady state pretty quickly. Now, let's compare robustness between our proposed method and the existing approach. As you can see, the features in the skeleton based are way too noisier compared to our proposed method. Also, the method is much faster. As you can see, let's compare the performance in numbers now. When we say system rise time and system settling time, we mean the highest rise time and settling time of the 3 control features. So here you can see the system rise time and system settling time has improved 23% and 20% respectively for our proposed method. When we say end effector rise time and end effector settling time, we mean the rise time and settling time of the last key point or control points in the set of control features. In this case, also, our proposed method has improved 28% and for rise time and 26% for settling time. I would like to bring your attention to the fact that in skeleton-based, the end effector key point, end effector control point is actually captured by an Aruko marker. But in our case, it's a purely natural feature. Even then, we are performing better. Our overshoot is also 36% better than the skeleton-based method. Now, I want you to observe some configurations, trajectories of a certain configuration. You can see that the manipulator is easily reaching some very edge of the workspace cases. The trajectories are also very smooth for all configurations. We also conducted repeatability test for one particular experiment for 5 times. And as you can see that the average rise time, settling time, or the overshoot are not much deviated. We were able to achieve servoing in 3D place, a 3D space, which means that the robot is moving, the plane of motion of the robot is perpendicular to the plane of the image. Here we were able to achieve this motion using just 2D feature points. However, there are a few limitations to this method. To these experiments. The features are, first off, we could not control the configurations which are left to the under the left side of the workspace of the robot. Also, we needed to tune control gain for each and every successful experiments. But even though servoing in 3D space came with certain limitations, in our knowledge, this is the first time we were able to achieve 3D configuration control using 2D key points. In summary, in our proposed method, we were able to generate natural visual features without any markers. We were able to control the robot in configuration space. Our method is robust to unknown robot model. Also, no encoder information is required during the control. We saw faster convergence with lower overshoot compared to the state-of-the-art method. We were able to servo in 3D Cartesian space just by using the 2D feature points. Our data collection pipeline is open source and is available in this QR code. However, we were unable to servo to some spatial configurations with our key points. We were also using different control gains for different spatial experiments, which is not expected. We also were unable to handle occlusions. So let's discuss finally about our future work. We had identified key points at the finger joints because we wanted to achieve grasping using visual features, which we were not able to due to time constraints. We are also thinking about expanding the data and improve the network to better handle the spatial cases. We are also thinking about using depth information as potential control features alongside the 2D key points. Also, to handle the occlusion, we are thinking about taking inspiration from NERF or extended version of the same, and we'll see what happens. So today, this is all from me about this paper, and I am happy to take some questions.